Welcome to the BIM Heroes podcast. We are here live at the BIM Coordinator Summit here in Dublin, Ireland. We look forward to the conversations we'll be having today. And we'll be starting off with the first conversation on the hour, talking about the education stage and the industry of AEC. It's a new medium that we're adding to the BIM Coordinator Summit here in Dublin, Ireland. And we wanted to get started this morning talking about the different stages. And one of the stages that will be here today is going to be education. I'm joined by Anne Carpenter and Jason Peters. Please introduce yourselves.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Anne.
Thank you. I'm Anne Carpenter with Global E-Training. Jason and I are both actually here as part of the Canadian representation. And Global E-Training is hosting the education stage today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how people from around the world are helping support all this knowledge associated with BIM.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Peters. I'm a technical account specialist with Autodesk, and as Anne said, we're on the education stage, and I'm going to be talking, funnily, about mistakes that BIM managers make throughout their career. So I was a BIM manager before I switched jobs, so I do actually know what I'm talking about, I think.
So we'll just get started with just, a generic question about where education is in this sector, right? One of the challenges that we see is that there's a lot of hardware, there's a lot of software that people need to learn. There's all the generic concepts of the industry that is vast. Just talk a little bit about where we are with the education spectrum and then where we're going with that.
Sure. Do you want me to go first?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, great. So I've been observing and supporting education for 9 years in the BIM world, and I still see that there's some companies that are just starting. They still need the basics of what is BIM and why should I care? And then we have other education partners or other clients that are really starting to get into the workflows, starting to get into the nitty-gritty of what makes them special and starting to be consistent in their practices. But it's very vast. And like you said, the content is changing all the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think people underestimate is the importance of supporting their investment in the software, in the hardware, in the education of it. Because if you're not staying up to date with what's new and what's the latest and what's the greatest, then why get the latest version of the Autodesk software? Because you are buying it, so you should use it. That's what I think.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
That's exactly it. And I think a lot of companies and people themselves don't invest enough on themselves, not realizing that their education is their tool. The more they know, the better of a tool they'll be. You can have a Revit power user that's really good, and then you can have someone else that does the exact same job but doesn't know nearly as much. But then when you go to either switch jobs, move up your corporate ladder, and if you're not able to either support yourself or support others, you're just not going to be a valuable tool to that company anymore.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I really notice is a lack of consistency. Mm-hmm. So in Revit, as an example, there is more than one way to get something done. But one way you could get it done maybe in 5 minutes. Another way it might take you 30 minutes to get it done. And what I hear from BIM managers is they spend a lot of their time saying the same thing over and over again, mm-hmm. and they don't really have any clarity without certain training protocols in place on how people are doing things. And so there's this disconnection in communication associated with coordination, collaboration, and efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things that you see a lot of, too, is that job descriptions of this career are just so vast, too. Whether you're somebody that's coming from university or college into the industry, how do you see those students that want to join, let's say, in a role that's more technology-based, brings them what they know, what they're used to, versus your traditional routes into the industry of, architecture, engineering, and construction?
I think if you come into it on the technology side, you need to be fully aware and have your eyes wide open that you don't really know as much as you think you do. Mm-hmm. School will prepare you. School will give you the basic tools and the basic education as to what you need in our industry. But a lot of it that a lot of us here probably have learned is you need to get out there and you need to hustle it yourself, and you need to upskill yourself. You need to always be on the ball and be willing to learn something. If you're not, you're just going to get left behind. You need to put that little extra in. Don't go home at like 5. Maybe you might have to go home at like 6 or do a little extra in the evening. Like, you just need to always constantly be upgrading and upskilling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that we work a lot with our executives and BIM leadership, is helping them help their people find place on their plates.
Right.
Right? I talk a lot about what's in it for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So what's in it for the C-suite, what's in it for management, and also what's in it for the employees. But you're right, if people aren't going to take the initiative to learn their skills, they have to find a space for it.
Right.
And to your point, like, people are coming into the industry perhaps with a degree, but maybe they've only used like Revit for 30 minutes. Because that's not really what the focus of the degree program was about.
Right.
And suddenly they're in a world where they're trying to touch all of these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only way to know it is by really committing yourself to learning them.
Do you feel like the industry as a whole does a good job of trying to bring new people into the industry the right way, or do you think that there's still a long way to go from our perspective back to them to get them to a point that they are educated enough to take us to the next step, and then we kind of mentor them forward?
It's not really the industry per se. I think it's more individual businesses, like architectural firms, structural engineering firms, construction firms. Once they get those people, they need to know what to do with them.
Because we're asking a lot of them.
Yeah,
right out the gate.
You are, like, you get a student like from where I'm from in Winnipeg, like, he could have like a 3-year design degree, and then next thing you know, he's there, and it's like, okay, well, here's a 4-story steel structure that we need you to design and get your drafter to help you create a 3D model and drawings out of. Now go. Here's your 68 hours. Now make it happen. That's when they start to panic, and they're like, whoa, this isn't really what I signed up for.
Right.
So it's businesses and mentors and leaders in companies need to step up a little bit and go, okay, we need to help these people along, and just not the days of just getting thrown to the wolves, I think is gone. We need to do on our end as senior people a little bit more to help them along,
right.
Mentor them and say, hey, there's a lot that you're going to need to know. We'll go step by step.
Yeah, the statistics show that people leave companies when they don't feel supported. And a lot of the big companies that I'm working with right now see their investment into an online training program. Yes, it's a SaaS product. Yes, it's plug and play, but you need a strategy to go with it for success. And people are choosing to invest because they want to do better by their people.
That's right.
They're starting to realize how hard it is to retain the kind of people they want. They know that there's a lot of intelligence out there, but there needs to be some support network so that people understand what's expected of them and have access to the information.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you see a lot is that we're trying to make them understand this isn't a job, it's a profession, right? It's not something that you can just start day one and you're going to know everything you need to know. And there's a lot of pain in that education. And I think it just makes you a better person with that pain, just like they've always been. But it's just so overwhelming with all the knowledge that they have that they don't know they need. And then on the flip side, when they start, I don't think we do a really good job of mentoring them forward. And just on that note, just some of the training that both of you offer in regards to either Autodesk with your software training or on any of the other types of training and leadership in general. What's the hardest thing that you see that they're really struggling with out there now?
With training in general, it's with a lot of companies, it's them trying to shoehorn time in, is to find that time and then to find the commitment from their employees as well. It was funny, I actually spoke to a technology manager from one of the architectural firms in Toronto, and we were talking about, well, how do you train your staff? And I go, do you guys do like lunch and learns and everything? And he actually like laughed in my face and said no. And he goes, we don't do lunch and learns. He goes, we make it's optional. Training is optional at the end of the day, hour and a half, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And he goes, we get more people that show up for that than they do when you kind of shoehorn one in every second week and feed them pizza and soda.
Yeah, more lunch and learn versus like formalized training.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you start to create a consistency, this is the thing that I think when I see companies that succeed at implementing a successful, what I call culture of learning, is this commitment from the BIM managers, from the supervisors, that there's time in the schedule that's provided in order to train. The other thing that I really talk a lot about, because I know that BIM managers are also swamped, is you have to recognize it isn't your job to teach everything. Your job is to create a way for people to gain the information. And it takes some retraining of your own mind to not just answer the question when it's presented to you. It's to say, did you go to the resources? Have you been looking? Did you use the plugin? Did you, the tools are there. Creating that culture of learning takes time. It's not an overnight sensation where suddenly people have, a resource and you think they're just going to start using it. You need to help them learn how to learn on the job.
And then in turn, they'll get the results that they're ultimately looking for, and the person will then take their career to the next level, right? And that's I feel like the industry that we're working in, it's just really crucially important. So talking about that, when somebody comes into the industry and let's say they start as a BIM manager or if they start as a BIM coordinator, what's some of the biggest challenges or some of the mistakes that you see that are like right off the bat, you're like, oh, here we go.
Oh, just like what Anne said, just feeling that they need to know everything.
Yeah.
And be able to absolutely do everything. I'll use an example. I'll use myself as an example. I've been using Revit for a while now. I can make families. I really don't like to. So in my last career as a BIM manager, I'd have a couple power users that could probably make a family like 5 times faster than me.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, here, just this is what I need. This is what I want it to do. This is what I need it to look like at the end. Now just go do it.
Right.
And I think, and that's a big mistake that BIM managers do is they feel that they have to do everything. I've got to be 100% power user. I have to know how all the software works, how it all works with each other. I need to know that if it's not being done right, that's what I really need to know. And I need to know which person to go talk to get the problem fixed. I can't do it all on my own. So that's why you manage a team. And I think people forget that a lot of the time with BIM managers. There's that word manager at the end that needs to be held up and followed. So.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of BIM managers who sometimes are the whole BIM team.
Right.
Especially in some of the smaller organizations. They're like, I'm the BIM manager. And I'm like, oh, who do you manage? Well, no one. I manage all the BIM projects. And so then I'm like, all right, well, let's start to think about what leadership looks like. You're going to get to a point where hopefully people are going to start supporting you to have an actual team, and moving from that spot where you're the guy on the spot or you're the gal that's expected to know everything and deliver everything to start to have a team where you support and mentor can be really tricky.
Yeah. Jason, on a more pointed note towards Autodesk in a way, do you feel like there's any particular software that a lot of people struggle with to get, because each one of them have their challenges, right? And I feel like Revit is one of those massive programs that's hard to learn.
You know what? I've been with Autodesk now for a couple months, and during my onboarding, it's unbelievable the amount of software that they actually have.
Oh, I know.
And that people use on a regular basis. That there was a couple where I'm like, I didn't even know existed. I would say, we'll use Revit as an example because that was my go-to program before. It's like with any program, there's always its challenge and it's always moving forward. You can get it to do just enough for you, but you need to figure out how to get it to do what you need it to do. You shouldn't have to change your way of doing something because initially the software is sending you in one direction. This is where then it takes the time, and you need to know that you have to invest some time in yourself and the software to go, okay, well, I'm going to take a step back, look at what I need to get done, and then look at the software and go, how do I get it to go from point A to point B without taking me way off track?
Right. And, software that you offer as part of that, what's some of the big challenges that you see as a whole? That, let's say, this is the number one training that everybody wants to, take because they feel like that's a really challenging topic.
Well, Revit is our number one.
Of course.
Absolutely. But to Jason's point, there's we have over 100 different Autodesk specific training programs, and I am not the expert. I'm the expert at global e-training. I never pretend to be the expert at the tools. But there's so many amazing ones that I think are underutilized.
Right.
Like the advanced steel product is really cool. Some of the things that people can do, you go to watch some of the things at the Autodesk shows, and you're like, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. But how do I do that? Yeah.
Well, right. How do I do it?
How do I get from this to this?
But we have a lot of people learning Microsoft tool.
Of course.
Because Excel is still it's a BIM tool.
It is.
It is. And so we see a lot of that. And then the other program that I think is really helpful, we have a leadership series that's specifically to your earlier question around people coming into the industry. We do see a lot of people, particularly in construction, that are being promoted out of the field into leadership roles. Pardon?
Quickly.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah.
And so, maybe they went to school to be a carpenter,
Right.
Or a welder,
Right.
But they don't have a lot of those leadership, like how do I actually manage and speak to people and get things done and delegate. And so we have this really great short program that gives people really fundamental tools on how to work with a team, how to speak in ways that people will listen, how to make decisions. And that's a program that I think is really crucial for people coming into this world, because once you start to know the tools, you become very valuable.
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
And you just add to that.
Exactly. And so you can become one of those people that just knows it all in your brain, the technical things, but doesn't bring to the organization those kinds of ways to grow the knowledge base outside of your own brain. And those leadership and soft skill programs become really important to be a really good leader.
And that's a great lead into this question is, there is a ton of soft skills that have to be learned on top of everything that is the technology. And I think that is where, a younger generation is taking the technology and trying to spearhead that and drive that forward. But on the back end, there's a lot of people that are towards the end of their careers, and they've got to pass on that knowledge, that soft skill, because this industry is vast, and the technology, like we talked about, is just one piece of that full picture. The question I have for both of you: do you feel like that is going successfully, or do we still got a long way to go?
I think on that end, we have a really long way to go. We have such a large knowledge base of people that are in their last 10, 15, 20 years of their career. And then there's so many people, like you were mentioning just earlier, coming right out of school and getting put in jobs where they're really actually have a lot of control and a lot of power. Like you take a VDC coordinator for a construction company, for example. I used to deal with them all the time, and they were so software focused.
Yeah.
They weren't really knowledgeable in construction or the process of construction or how a job actually flows properly. And so you'd be in BIM execution meetings, you get emails from them, phone calls just saying, well, you're not doing it the right way. And like, well, no.
Right, in the right order.
Yeah. Well, we are doing it the right way, but we'll work with you, but you just can't all of a sudden just go, oh, hey, I'm now the VDC coordinator. I can use all the fancy coordination tools.
Yeah.
You're doing your job wrong. And that just gets people on their heels, where you say it's soft skills.
It is.
We, as an older generation, need soft skills to speak to the younger generation. And the younger generation needs the soft skills to speak to us. And we kind of somehow have to get that communication going. So, because there's a huge gap in between the younger up-and-comer go-getters who are really digging the software and the people who've been around for a while who really like the process and, use the software, don't like it as much.
Right.
So we need to find that middle ground.
Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on that?
Well, one of the things I still see a lot in the industry is people that are in the C-suite, they actually don't necessarily understand the software.
Right. And what the power of it could be. Yeah.
And so when a BIM manager or a VDC specialist or someone who's like supposed to be helping with innovation goes to leadership and says, hey, we need to invest in a training program, they're like, why? They don't really get it. And the other thing that I'm seeing that for me is a frustrating thing is this idea that there's never time for training, but there's always time for rework. And it's a way that the industry works with money that, in my opinion, is problematic. It leads to waste. It's not environmentally responsible. And so getting it into upper leadership's head, the importance of let's train people so that they do it right the first time will ultimately save us money.
Right.
I think that's really important. And I also do think, of course, that the senior folks that have so much senior leadership folks that have so much mentorship to offer, there has to be a way to push it out and share it with people, because we don't want to lose that knowledge, because a tool is just a tool.
Correct.
And so, again, this idea of how do we capture the knowledge that are in people's minds and deliver it in a way that is consumable and trackable, it's really important.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge with a younger generation is that we rely on the technology to solve the problem, and that's never been the case in this industry. It's always been years of experience, and then take the technology of the time to help supplement that issue. And it goes to the simple point of, in the industry, there is no back of the book. There's a lot of right answers, there's a lot of wrong answers, but they're really struggling with that right now. They're like, how do I know it's correct? How do I know that what I'm modeling or what I'm coordinating is the right thing? Discuss that concept of where that is.
Well, I think that's a really good point. Like about 6 months ago, when I was still a BIM manager, we had a really young Revit user. She was fantastic. Like she really kind of understood the program and everything. But every once in a while I'd ask her, it's like, well, why are you modeling that? And she's like, well, because I can. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to sit down and talk about what you need to model and what you don't, and which data you need to put in your model and what data you don't. Because, at the end of the day, especially with a Revit model, that's what everyone's looking for, is the data. And we don't want it to be too data heavy, but you don't want it to be too light.
Right.
You need to just be able to use it to, at least from Canada, make your drawings from and have the data transfer at the end of the day. And so the whole answer of like, well, it's because I can, or because, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. It's like, that is up to people like me and other people in the office to, like, you just said, like, we have to educate the younger people, and and it's hard to, because at the end of the day, production work always comes first.
Right.
The boss always wants to see the jobs getting out the door.
Yep.
And it's like, if you take, and I'm a big fan of saying, okay, well, I've just spent half an hour showing someone a way to do something that's going to save them 45 minutes every week for the rest of their lives. Add that up. There's 52 weeks in a year, something like that.
Yep.
Times that by 42, times that whatever their charge out hour is. That's how much money you've just saved by me spending half an hour. So.
And think about what happens if you spent that half an hour one time and you captured that and you could share it with your whole team instead of having to do each person for 30 minutes each time. Because that's one of the things when we talk about the cost of what we call informal training.
Right.
Over-the-shoulder training. So I've solved I've solved something for you for 30 minutes, but like, what about your 12 colleagues?
Right.
And so that's something that when we're looking at efficiencies, and something that you guys have mentioned, which I think is really interesting and challenging in the time that we're at, is that the meaning of tool is changing, right? With AI coming into play, with generative design, the design is starting to think, it's starting to evolve, and that you have to make decisions about what the computer's presenting to you. And then, it's this mix of the way we used to do things, what we knew to be true, and what the model is telling us, especially when you've applied generative design features, like how a bicycle can be built looks so different than when we were kids, drew a bicycle, and it can use less steel, and it can be stronger, and it can be made of aluminum, it can be made of lots of things now.
Right.
And as the power of the tools continue to grow, I think that's where the training of the soft skills and the logical thinking and the analysis, they're going to become more and more important.
Right. And that's a good lead into this question is in the States and Canada, one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is that the model is on a contract document.
Right.
And I think it's so frustrating because when you come to Europe, it is absolutely a contract document. So there is a big divide there, and there's a lot of pushback from both sides of this equation. But they always mention, and you mentioned earlier, Jason, that we create the drawings that are contract documents and from the model. Just want to have this conversation just at a high level and how we educate that to drive that forward.
Well, that's funny that you bring that up because, when I first started out in this industry, it was hand drafting and then into AutoCAD. And the point of truth was at the end of the project when the engineer sealed that drawing, that was it. That was the truth. That was it. There was your data right there. And then as I progressed through my career, it's completely switched now to, and I see why some of the older generation, especially the older engineers and stuff, they don't have that tangible. I can't get my hands on it unless I know the software. And they, having to go in and go, okay, well, how do we know that model's correct?
Right.
Well, it's correct because if you click on that, if you touch that item, it tells you what it is, and all the design loads are in there, so it's correct. And they're like, but it's in the model, and I'm like, I get that. So it's a mindset that people need to get past. They need to get past that whole, I need to see it either on my desk or on a PDF. On my computer screen, it's like, no, just go into the model and look at it. Look at the data that it produces. Look at the schedules that it produces. There it is. If it's wrong, we can fix it in the model.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have a strong opinion about this. It's why I train. I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah.
Basically the digital twin that is possible if you do BIM correctly. There's so much value in that being passed forward. There's so much efficiency that can be built. There's the idea of what I call utopian BIM. It's what I strive to help people achieve. And until the model can be a part of the legal document,
right,
it's still going to be optional. It's still going to be extraneous and seen as costly. And there's a battle.
Maybe a way of creating a rendering versus like actually using it for its intent,
right?
The purpose of
the purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to continue to stand firm in that. This just makes sense.
Yep.
And let's sue people less, because we got it right in the model in the first place, and then we worked from the model.
And we're a three-dimensional world that we are interacting with, that we're trying to put something that's static, the building or bridge or anything, but it's in a dynamic world. So how are we still stuck in this idea of just drawing? So here we have the technology today that has never been possible. So
it's just simple little things. Like it's just a struggle sometimes. You deal with people that say, well, we've worked on a project, and you say it's done. We've produced our drawings, but now how do I review it? How do I do my coordination? It's like, well, it's done. It was done in the model. The drafting team did that, and we round-tripped our analytical model design, and the design's done, and it's all been checked. It's good. Well, how do you know? Well, it's like I just said that. We just did a design coordination in the model.
With all the proper parties, with all the different pieces, and I feel like that's a huge thing that you're starting to see, whether it's on the front end with generative design that you brought up earlier, which I think is going to fundamentally change the industry as a whole. Because on that side of the equation, now it's not just, as I was discussing earlier, it's not just one right answer. Here's the different options that we have to be able to solve this problem. Let's actually think through these, and here's the options, and let's do that. And then on the back end, you're starting to see a lot more participation from all the way down to vendors that are providing all this information to the subs that then know, and their trades are in that, and then the GC can fundamentally accept those results to help build the product.
Yeah. I run in with older engineers that say, well, how can we do this? If we have 4 designs, we have 4 design options, so we're supposed to design this building 4 times. And I'm like, no, you're not supposed to design this building 4 times. You now have like 4 schematic designs that have been done in the morning.
Right.
And now we can send it out and people can look at it and do their job on the other end. And it can all roll right down from, like you said, like suppliers right on through to the contractor. And they go, option A is the one we want to go with. And then we take off from there. It's not like we're going to do a full issue construction set of drawings on 4 different buildings.
Right.
So it's just, like was mentioned, people aren't educated in what's going to become the new process.
Right.
And that's the hardest part is, as we're talking about, is educating people and showing them that this, don't freak out because it's different than what you're used to doing. Just take a breath, sit back, and we'll figure it all out together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what's your thoughts on that?
It's really a wild time.
It is.
That's the truth of it. Things are changing every single day. And if you're not tapped into a place where you can be in an open, receiving place to say, oh, I didn't know I did it this way for a long time. Mm-hmm. But look how cool this is, and look how amazing, and look how much more efficient it can be. And so one of the things I think about a lot is how ego can get in the way of evolution.
Of course.
And so we need to balance what we know,
Yep.
the wisdom that we bring forward, with what the technology is showing us.
That's right.
And so it is why I'm passionate about this culture of learning,
mm-hmm.
right? We need to, I believe that companies that create a sense of curiosity, who permit mistakes, who have teachable moments, and then can capture that, have data to support what works, what doesn't work, and then believe the data, use the data, try new things. I think that's going to be critical for success.
And then, piggybacking off of that, what are some of the workflows that you have seen that's effective in leading projects?
Oh, there's so many different ones out there. It's just, just a true coordination model between the different disciplines and the different trades. You can't go into a project anymore and have people say, oh, well, I'm going to use this software, I'm going to use that software, you use this software. Yeah, it's all BIM and all the data is going to get there, but it's like, well, there's got to be an easier way. Like, use a platform, decide, it doesn't matter. Like, it's Autodesk, Microsoft, whichever one. Just, people have to be on the same playing field. You got to be, if you're going to go play baseball, you got to go play baseball. You can't show up with a football and say, hey, let's make something up as we go along.
That's right.
So, I don't want to say follow the rules, but you got to just play the game the right way.
Right.
You have to agree on the playing field. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool tools out there mm-hmm. to achieve that. And I think this year is a really big, that's what I'm seeing. A lot of these new pieces of software that are getting really popular, that's what they help with. They help with the communication between processes, between vendors, between stages. We have a new partnership with Revisto, mm-hmm. and I went to their first international conference, and it was really exciting to be there because everyone that was there was an innovator. They were so excited about what it can do. There's things you can do right from your phone that enable you to coordinate and communicate with people. So it's about, okay, we've done the work, we've got the model, we've got the schematics, whatever the data is that we need to then apply. How do we talk to each other?
That's right.
And how do we work as a team to get it done in real time with less mistakes?
Yeah, and that's the piece of it that I feel like as people are coming into the industry, this communication skills. It's not just digital. It's still communicative, versus writing it down, versus trying to explain it by oral communication. And I think that the communication along with the collaboration, whether it's from the front end of getting the model into an environment where everybody's working on it, because we have different stages. So there's always this debate that goes on. Okay, it's a dynamic model, it's constantly changing, and we're going to work our way through the different stages of design. But we only want you to see when it comes to a stop. So how can be more collaborative in that environment, but still contractually, this is the stop point when we're getting to that?
Well, it's fully like what you were mentioning before. It's communication. It's just basic, simple communication, and just not like tagging something in a model or sending an email. It's actually like having a face-to-face conversation. There's Teams, there's Zoom. You guys can do that. Pick up the phone. Things that are really simple that way. For a good example, is a couple of years ago, we were working on a project, and on our side, on the structural side, we had to put a column in a window. Mm-hmm. And so we mentioned it to the design team. It's like, oh, hey, well, there's going to be this column right here. Someone needs to let the architect know. And everyone's like, well, it's in the model. They'll figure it out. A couple weeks later, the architect calls me and goes, there's a column in our window. And I'm like, seriously, no one phoned you and told you about that?
Yeah.
And he's like, no. How long has that been there? I go, well, I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
we need to get it fixed. And in the end, it's like they had to backtrack 2 weeks worth of work.
Right.
So it's not like just because you see it and it's in the model, you still have to communicate that it's there.
Yeah, because it's a catch-22, right? Sometimes it is part of the intent. Mm-hmm. Like this is what I want to do, and then let's say I leave that beam exposed, and it's part of the architectural design. I want that feeling, just like the arena that we're in. And this is what it was intended to do. But there's certain designs that are meant to be that way. But if we don't collaborate and we don't communicate that, then we spend months on end trying to coordinate something, and all of a sudden we're like, well, why didn't you catch that? Well, we did catch it, but there wasn't a good way to let you know, either by email or by calling you or you name it. Now with products that are out there, it's becoming much more collaborative,
yeah,
and much more engaged in that. And my question that goes further with that is, I think it's got to go all the way into the design programs. So like when we're making these changes, it finds its way all the way into the authoring tool. Because we can have this product here and we're reviewing it and we're collaborating, and then you have the authoring tool, but there's always that switchback of making sure that the issue that you're solving is truly right there. Mm-hmm. And there is products out there that have started to do that, but I think that's been a big challenge in the industry, is that collaboration piece. And just thoughts on that and where you see that headed.
From my past job as a structural consultant, it's, collaboration is key. And it's, it either when it works really well, it works great. And when it doesn't, it just falls apart. And it's just people not wanting to play friendly with everyone else in the pool. Mm-hmm. They're all like, no, this is mine. I'm not going to share my data with you because it's mine. Right. Why do I want to give you my data that I just spent 2 months working on?
Yes.
It's like, well, that's part of the whole process. It's to share the data. And I think that's the mindset we have to get out of, is we need to share all this information.
Yep.
Like, if you're going to do a project in Revit, you're going to share your Revit model. That's as simple as that. You're not going to like every week go in, strip out a model just to send to an architect so he can plop some beams in.
No.
So it's just, put it on the cloud. Let's get going. So.
And the models are so big now. So you're not talking about a little bit of data. You're moving big data, and you don't want to have to download that from the cloud. We want to use that ability, that power that comes with that. It's just, it's that challenge of going back to the question is, it's not a contract document across the pond. And so when they want a GC or a sub to price that, it's got to be a hard line stop versus this design that is dynamic all the way from beginning to the point in which you go to contract with it. And even after that, you're still dealing with ASIs and so forth and so on that change the contract. I just think that's a huge challenge that we've got to overcome.
It is, and I've been on projects where we, have sent out models to steel suppliers and timber suppliers before we've sealed our IFC drawings, and it's always worked out really well.
Yeah.
Well, I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that what this industry does is actually truly creative. And the more we embrace the collaboration aspects of it, the more creative we can be. And creativity always leads us down paths that maybe we didn't expect, but that can have really wonderful outcomes. And so it's always, again, the tools are just the tools, but it's the human aspect and the human collaboration that is really critical.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how great a tool is, if you're not talking about it, if you're not making it important, if you're not talking about how you want to use it together, that tool's just a tool.
That's right.
And a model's just going to be a model. The power of being able to hand off an actually really powerful model to someone who's going to maintain that building for the next 50 or 100 years. To me, what is possible with that in terms of quality of life for the people living in that building, for the people that are trying to maintain it, for safety, and again, of course, for the environment.
Right.
It can't be understated.
Yeah, and I think that the interoperability between products, along with trying to bring some of this, hard data like specifications that nobody wants to really read, it's tedious. I mean, the design team is tediously putting it together versus the contractor and the subs that are trying to read through that to make sure that the intent is made. It's not as sexy as the drawings are, right?
Right.
But it's something that needs to absolutely be a part of the model, because in general, if we're ever going to get to a digital twin or something in the end, that information has to start organically in the design process and work its way all the way through. And I just think that piece of it within the design software, whether it's the code, to back check some of the code that's either at a national level or international level or even at a local level, I think is the next great start on the design side to make sure that that's complete. The other piece of that is like the specifications. Could the design authoring tool help with the creation of that? And that it's linked together between that. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
On like the structural side of things, like specifications are the last things we do. And it sucks, and no one wants to do it.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to read them. Nobody wants to put them together. And it feels like you always are reading the same specs, but it might not be for the job that you're on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're always missing something. You're forgetting something. Like, if, it was innately smart to say, hey, there's masonry in your building. Here's the masonry spec. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Instead of having to, whoever your spec writer is, if you don't write your own specs, having to come and ask you like 600 questions.
Right.
Is this in there? Is that in there? It's like, well, there's the model. Just take a look.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that in terms of, the whole industry as a whole versus just the, the design aspect? It goes all the way through and through. If we could take that information from, let's say, the code and the specifications, and we can apply it to, let's say, 5D to help us cost estimate a lot better in the products or exactly what we're trying to do. I think there's just a lot of challenges on that front.
I agree. I mean, when I take a sales call with a small vendor, someone who maybe is delivering the HVAC,
yes.
or they're, a lot of times they're like, man, we don't know BIM. We don't do BIM. Like,
right.
And how is the model supporting them? How is it serving them? What makes them want to start to work in that environment rather than just a takeoff, right? Rather than a blueprint that came from a model. And yeah, the devil is in the details. And it is overwhelming, and it's, a question of, like you said, the models are massive and they live in the cloud, and there's massive computational effort required. But everyone needs to understand why it's worth it.
Absolutely. My final question to both of you on the hour here is, in the industry, we're always constructing a project. And then we go to the next project. And then we go to the next project. But in reality, what we're looking at is a smarter global ecosystem.
Yes.
And when are we going to get to the point, and how do we get to the point where we don't just look at BIM as a project-to-project solution, but a more global urban environment, smart city situation?
That's really not that it will happen, but everyone is going to have to be in agreement with it.
Right.
And everyone's going to have to be on board, and it's going to take time. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I'll probably be done working by the time that happens. Everyone just needs to change their mindset and look at it as a larger whole as opposed to the piece that's in front of them at that time.
Because we don't want to get to the point where it was paper drawings and they're falling apart 60 years from now. We want to use the data that we're building project to project to actively put together a full urban environment of what this looks like for us, for the cities.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, we just don't want to get stuck in our little silo of, okay, I've done that building, all that information for that building, just we'll tuck that away. You need to keep it out and open and available at all the times.
Absolutely. What's your thoughts?
That's a large philosophical question.
Of course.
For,
For the
8
whole
a.m.
industry.
For the whole industry. My thoughts are this, is that I think there is a fear that collaboration, that systemization can destroy creativity.
Yes.
And I think that we need to face that. Like, we need to address it. We're conditioned to believe a lot of things that are not necessarily true.
Right.
And once we start to figure out how to be creative in other ways, we're going to find that there's a lot of freedom that can come from how we choose to do things that are environmentally responsible, that are
Cut down on the waste. And
exactly. And you start to get creative in different ways. And I think that is true for so many things, but particularly in this space, because if we want building A to talk to building B, you know, that level of communication, that level of sharing,
Yep.
perhaps some fundamental infrastructure underground.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of things that we could do to be more environmentally responsible.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a leap of trust.
And it's not a static world, it's a dynamic world.
Yeah.
And we treat it today as a more static model versus a more dynamic of how it all interacts with each other.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you. It's been a great conversation this hour. Look forward to both of your presentations later on today on education. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much. We'll be at Stage 8, starting at 2 p.m. I think there's going to be some really wonderful speakers there. And we appreciate your time today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cody. It's been great, man.